Welcome back. The bow is now sufficiently cooled where we can begin to heat and deflex the outer limbs. At this stage, that's the real operation that we need to do. I do want to add string bridges, but that's something that will come later. In fact, I might say, if you were planning ahead and you had sufficient wood, leaving a small amount of wood present here that you could then carve a string bridge into would be an excellent, exceptionally smart way to do that. So, what I do is I look at the limb and say, here's the handle, and then here's the elbow, so to speak, the knee, the back of the knee. And we're looking at the middle section, right here. This is the section we want to soften and bend down. Right here is where you can see this mark. That's where the reinforcing pipe ends. So we have to be careful, because beyond here it will puff. It will absolutely 100% puff back to its roundish shape. So we need to be careful to mostly heat right here, and then, as necessary, back here. Let's give it a shot. This is going to be interesting. I can feel already just how rigid this pipe is going to be. I have very good feelings about this. I wish there were a better way to heat the inside of the pipe so we could do this nice and evenly without risk of over-puffing the outer limbs. Unfortunately, I don't think that's possible. We'll just have to exercise caution and re-tailor the limb later as necessary. Normally, we would already be ready to start shaping it. To brace it against our knee or a soup can or an object and start to shape it. But because of the inner pipe, I have a feeling that we're still a good minute or so away, at the very least. We don't want this to become plastic and soft, malleable. We want this to stay somewhat rigid. We're just loosening up the molecular bonds. Not to the point where it's so slippery that it'll take a whole new shape, just to where we can shape it with a little bit of force. Let's just see where it is, because I have no idea what to expect. Okay. To make sure you can see this, so I'm going to angle the camera, and then I'm grabbing near where the end of the reinforcement is. Looks like it's ready to bend there, but it's not ready to bend at the inner pipe where it's reinforced. So let's continue heating gently in that area. And it actually looks to me like the outer pipe is starting to deform, become round, while the inner pipe, of course, is not. I certainly hope that doesn't create problems later on for us. But I have every confidence that we'll be able to pull something off. Whether or not it's a successful bow, it will be a learning experience. Let me get you back so you can see. Alright. Trying again now. Bracing and bending. Well, it's certainly bending, but it's a bit challenging because of that inner reinforcing pipe. It doesn't want to bend evenly. Not yet. A little more heat, a little more time, and I think we'll have it. This calls for patience and moderation. Rushing this would be a mistake. And you can see from the side that we've already lost our nice even taper. But I think when we bend this, we're going to recover a lot of that. Okay. So now, again, sighting down the limb, I'm just going to start to flex that portion until I'm satisfied with it. That's looking pretty darn good, gotta say. See what I mean? Now the taper is back. It looks good. The reinforcement only ends out here where the forces are less, and my hope is that the lack of reinforcement there won't be a liability. I don't think it will be. So now, sight down the end of the bow. If you can see me here in the corner, I'm looking down the end, and I'm correcting any kinks, or you'll notice that it'll tend to want to do that. It'll tend to want to draw itself out of alignment. This is the time to correct it. Okay, that's looking excellent. I might add a tiny bit more of a bend just inside of that a little bit later, but for now, that's good. That's great, in fact. And it's entirely possible that once we're done, this is an acceptable amount of reflex. We'll have to wait and see. We'll have to do it to the other side now. Let me just run this under a little bit of cold water. And then we can go ahead and start the other side. As I mentioned, that's only going to set the outside, not going to set the inner core. So just bear that in mind. Fantastic. Now the same deal between here and here, which is really this section right here we want to heat. Let's get to it and finish this up. I know there are people out there who want me to leave these, to not put so much deflex in the bows. I assure you I wouldn't be doing it if it weren't useful. It both helps to maintain a... Hello YouTube, welcome back. Here, this is the final profile of the, I don't know what they call it, the reinforced Manchu bow, I guess. I had taken some of the reflex out of the handle, and I had increased the deflex, just like I said, in the mid-limbs. I then straightened it a little bit by heating several seconds here and then pushing like that. And the bottom line is it's very well aligned now. It looks great. It strings up. One issue that I'd like to deal with, it's not a problem per se, but one of the Sias is a little bit more flexible than the other. I believe it's just a little bit thinner here up at the top. So I may go and gently heat this area or recurve it just a tiny bit more to balance them out. That's for another time though. Right now I just want to get the bow up and running so we can actually do a draw test on it and see if it's been worthwhile. The overall length is about an inch or two longer than the first one. So if we even maintain draw weight, that could be acceptable. I took a 1/2 inch piece of PVC, I cut it into small sections of about 1/2 inch long, and then I filed them even, filed down the insides, flattened them using not this pen, but another pen. So after it was hot, I did that to them. There are no sharp edges that could then damage the string. My intention is to now glue them on to the ends of the PVC like so. If you wanted to reinforce it, since it's hollow like this, you could slip string through it and tie it around. Especially if you just use a single filament of Dacron, you could make it extremely strong, and then you could glue that on. Just brush it over with some either hot glue or other glues, cyanoacrylate super glues. That would work really, really well. But right now, I'll do that, and I'll show you another way to hot glue stuff. When I'm feeling lazy and not feeling like letting the hot glue gun heat up, I just use the heat gun. Again, you don't need to put it on maximum heat setting. You can just heat it like so. I do like to heat the surfaces that I'm going to be gluing, just so it doesn't set quite as quickly as it otherwise could. Now that's already going to be plenty soft, I guarantee. So let's just apply hot glue generously. If it sets, no big deal. We can come right back and do this. You just reheat it like that and it's easy as pie. So let's take our first string bridge, affix it, squish it down, make sure it's centered, and push it down tight. What you can then do later if you want is add some more hot glue all around the edge. I find adding a little bit more makes it a lot more durable, because these do encounter quite a bit of force as the string snaps into them, and they can pop off. I've had that happen both with epoxy, cyanoacrylates, hot glue. Your best bet might be to do a PVC to PVC weld, actually get some PVC solvent and glue it together using PVC glue, and then reinforce it around the edge with another form of glue. Alternatively, like I said, doing this and then tying it on would be extremely positive. However, I've had fairly few problems when I've simply made good use of large quantities of super glue, or hot glue, I'm sorry. While that cools, it's already mostly set. Let's flip it around and use this one. Now the string bridges serve two purposes. The first is to center the string. That's their primary purpose. Highly reflexed bows, which this is not necessarily an example of, just due to the intense deflex in the design, they tend to be under quite a lot of stress and want to twist. Bows, the more stress that bows are under, usually the more they'll want to twist. And their particular design tends to give them a little bit more leverage, make it easier for them to twist. So one thing you can do is add a bridge, and you see if the string is off-center, it will pop right back into the center. That's the idea anyway. And in reality, they do mostly function that way, and they do a really good job of it. The longer Siad bows, in particular, if they have reflex, if they don't, let's say like the Hungarian Magyar style bows, they can be very similar to this, but the strings, there's no contact. It's just knock, knock, that's it. With the Qing, Manchu, Jurchen, later Chinese style bows like this with very long Sias that are angled somewhat forward, they've got to rest somewhere on the back of the bow, or on the belly rather, the side that's at the towards the archer. and that creates a hinge, a little bit of pivot, and a lot of tension where it'll try and snap itself around. This helps to prevent that. Second function, it creates a point even further back that the string can hinge off of. So when I add the string, it's going to first contact the bow at this point and this point. The bow is effectively a 40-inch long bow, or rather, 38 or whatever it is, accounting for the curves. Then, once you've drawn it and it lifts off the bridges, the bow lengthens. This is very similar to a modern compound bow. The effect is you're in high gear, stacking in lots of energy right off the get-go. And then, further in the draw, it eases up. Now, in this case, since the bow is still increasing in draw length, you're still going to be stacking or adding more and more energy into the bow. It'll simply add it in slower. It's a very effective way to design a high energy input bow. The force draw curve of a conventional long bow is typically somewhat concave, just slightly concave. The force draw curve of a recurve bow is typically slightly convex, and bows like this can be extremely convex compared to their straight bow, self bow brethren. This is it for now. I'm going to go string it up, test shoot it, and do some final adjustments, and then we can have fun with this. And then if this works out and the bow survives, especially if it survives a pull to 30 inches, which is my ultimate goal for draw length, I'm going to ship this off to somebody and hope they can use it better than I can. Thanks for watching, YouTube.